Sahana Bhavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so we continue Śrī Tattva-sutra by Srila Bhakti-yoga Thakur. On Tuesday we finished with, we started Sutra 35, which is hearing and chanting of the divine narrations and so forth are the feature of devotional performances which help the cultivation of divine love. And then we talked about that a little bit. We had Srila Prabhupada's input on that idea in his purport to Mantra 13, Śrī Īśopaniṣad. And now we'll read what Srila Bhakti-yoga Thakur has to say. The unalloyed state of the devotional sentiment is called prema, divine love. So that's the pure state of devotional sentiment. This divine love manifested in the purified mind is called bhava. This bhava itself is the manifestation of divine love in the conditioned state of the jivas. Physical activities cultured according to this divine love-natured bhava are known as devotional performances, sadhana. This is important to understand because sometimes we equate the word sadhana with schedule, like a steady schedule, right? And that can be part of it. But it's really the physical activities cultured according to this divine love natured bhava, which is the divine love manifested within the purified mind. That's called bhava. So the physical activities cultured according to this divine love-natured bhava, that's known as devotional performances, sadhana. So the activities we may be doing, but if it's not done in this way, with this awakening of divine love, then it's not actually devotional service. Continuing, devotional performances devoid of devotional sentiments are not conducive to devotion. Right, so basically, I didn't even have to make the point because Srila Bhakti-yoga Thakur made it for me. Devotional performances means the activity itself, devoid of devotional sentiments, are not conducive to devotion. And then he gives some examples. Pigeons living in the temple and fish living in the Ganga, right? So we say, well, I'm a temple devotee. That means I'm always engaged in devotional service. This is my sadhana, this is my practice, right? There's also pigeons living in the temple. Are they going back to Godhead? Means they're getting some benefit. They're hearing transcendental sound vibration. They're seeing the devotees and the deities. They may be creating some offenses because they may be passing stool in areas that are meant to be clean. But they're animals, so it's not really taken in the same way. But the point is that just living in the temple isn't enough to get back to Godhead. It's enough to get some benefit. But we're not in this to make some benefit. If we just wanted to get some benefit, remain a pigeon and live in the temple, right? Or, become just volunteer. But no, we don't want some benefit. We want to reawaken our eternal love for Krishna, right? Same thing, the fish that live in the Ganga, because bathing in the Ganga is purifying, right? So the fish, they're constantly bathing in the Ganga. So that means they're the most pure, right? They're constantly purified, always. So they're the most pure, right? So these things are there. The Ganga is purifying because of its association with the Supreme Lord. It's the water that washed his feet, and therefore it's purifying. But if these things, bathing in the Ganga, living in a temple, if they're devoid of devotional sentiments, then they're not actually conducive to devotion, right? Like I said, some benefits there, but it's not what we're looking for. When a devotee is engaged in devotional performances, both his mind and soul are illuminated with bhava and prema. In this way, devotional performance itself is the cultivation of divine love. Therefore, when the word sadhana is mentioned, it includes the principles of bhava and prema in it. Again, very important for us to understand this, because otherwise, if we take sadhana as the detail and do not understand the principle of what sadhana is, reading this paragraph, not the first paragraph of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary, but the second one, we may think that just going through these schedules and going through these motions, automatically we're becoming illuminated with bhava and prema, right? But that's not what it says here. It says when he's actually engaged in these devotional performances, and as the paragraph before mentions, having that devotional sentiment, then the mind and soul are illuminated with bhava and prema, right? Because otherwise, you're following some detail, you're getting some benefit. It's like the pigeons and the fish. So when it says when sadhana is mentioned, it includes the principles of bhava and prema, that means actually if we're following the principles of sadhana properly, we're trying to reawaken that eternal relationship. When we actually see the relationship between us and Krishna, and it's actually service, then bhava and prema is included. Continuing. The devotional performances are of two types: esoteric raganuga and esoteric regulated by scriptural rules called sadhana. The esoteric devotional performances are to be followed as long as devotional sentiments are manifested. These rules are described by the sages. Attainment of devotional attachment to the Supreme Lord is the real award of following these rules, right? So the result of following sadhana bhakti is the attainment of devotional attachment. So that's raganuga bhakti, when you're spontaneously engaging. So this is the real reward of following those rules. Yes?
There is twice esoteric. The same word is used.
Yeah, so they're both esoteric. But the difference is raganuga, which is spontaneous, and the other one is regulated.
Shouldn't it be exoteric in the second one?
What's it? Exoteric?
Exoteric means external, esoteric is internal.
That's quite possible. So the definition of esoteric that I'm accustomed to is more of like a rarity. Let's see. But it would make sense. Let me see. Yeah, esoteric means intended or likely to be understood only by a small number of people. So it means it's rare. Obscure. That's another word. Now let me look up X. Is there another definition for that? Let's see. Let's see. It does say compare with exoteric. So, oh yeah, from within. That's the original from the 7th century Greek. And exoteric, intend to be likely understood by the general public. It might not be that though, because it also is very rare to actually understand the actual process of sadhana bhakti. It's also very rare to not only to properly follow it, but even to come in contact with it. So it might not be a typo there. But if you, if you take it to mean that way, not the rare way, but the, from within and from without, then yes, you can see it that way as well. Yeah, I'm more accustomed to the definition that's rare. But yeah, it works that way as well. If you're looking at it, it's internal and external. Okay, he continues. Among the 64 methods of sadhana, Sri Rupa Goswami has emphasized 5 as most important. Number 1, delighting in visualizing Sri Murti, so deity worship. Number 2, faith on hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, study of Shastra. Number 3, association of devotees, sadhu sangha. Number 4, hearing and chanting the holy name. And number 5, residing in the holy abodes of Mathura, etc. So again, these things, we have to understand what these 5 things truly mean, because otherwise you can walk into a temple and look at a deity without actually understanding what you're doing. You can listen to Srimad Bhagavatam without hearing the message of the Bhagavatam. You can be in proximity with devotees without actually associating with it. It means to learn from and to adapt their qualities, to become one with that community, not in the merging sense, but in the cooperative sense. As we found out very early on in this book, you can hear and chant for a very long time, but if there's offenses and if you're not actually inquiring into who the Supreme is and what your relationship is to him, then you can spend many, many births. And residing in the holy abode of Mathura, etc. Again, someone can physically be present somewhere, but not be transcendentally connected. The examples with the pigeons and the fish. So these 5 things, we can't just take them cheaply or at face value. If we want to do these things, it's not that I can check that off my list, I'm doing that. Here I am, my poor, all right, living in the Dham. Go to Bhagavatam class every morning, or at least I'll, put it on while I'm doing my service. I'll put it on the YouTube or the Mayapur TV or whatever, while I'm banging around the pots and pans, and occasionally I'll hear something, or, in other words, we don't want to take these things cheaply. We want to know how to properly actually do these things. So there's a right way to see the deity, and that begins with when you wake up, how you properly cleanse yourself, purify yourself, mark yourself as a temple of Vishnu while remembering him. Before you walk into the temple, also, then you're going to again cleanse yourself because you just walked. And then you also want to have the proper mood. So it's not just about these external things, making sure you're pure and presentable to the deity. But we want to see the deity, and we want the deity to be happy to see us. So our behavior should be that which, it's a nice relationship, right? When we do something bad, and then we see our parents and they have a disappointed look on their face, it's crushing, right? So we have a relationship with our parent. We also should have this, it's a much deeper relationship with Krishna, where we should present ourselves in the best possible way that we can, right? And so that's what it means, not just standing in front of the deity and, like that. So that's number 1. Number 2, faith on hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the most important literature in the entire world. It has everything we need to go back home, back to Godhead. It has everything we need to get rid of all of the things that are keeping us here in the material world, and gives us everything that we need to re-enter our pastimes with Krishna, right? So we have to see it as that, the most important thing in our life, right? The order of the spiritual master, the association of devotees, the Srimad Bhagavatam. We cannot exist without these things. So when we understand actually how much impact this literature can have on us, then we start respecting it accordingly. And then instead of sometimes referring to it when we want to prove a point to someone, we're actually living it on our daily lives. We're actually associating with devotees who are, we're having pastimes with Krishna in his different incarnations. And we're learning from them how to apply bhakti in our lives. So this is what it means, not just, listening from time to time. It means learning from those devotees, which then brings us to the third, association of devotees. Again, it doesn't mean just proximity. I've moved around in a lot of circles, in a lot of different countries, and I see people's different ideas of what this means, association of devotees. And sometimes it just means, like every, once a month, a few aspiring Vaishnavas get together and they go to the latest, the newest vegan restaurant, and they go and they, mostly they're talking about other stuff, but I guess we can talk about Krishna for a little while if you want, a little bit. That's what they consider association with devotees, because they're just the devotees and we're associating, right? But that's not what association with the devotees means, right? Sadhu Sangha or Sat Sangha. It's coming from that Sat principle, the eternal principle. So there are eternal qualities. We can read about them in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Nectar Devotion. There are these qualities that are there that are eternal, right? And they exist in the devotees. When we can identify, we notice these Sat features, these qualities, and we are inspired to ourselves uncover those qualities, because they're within all of us. We also Sat Chidananda, we've covered. So when we, through our association or identification with the body of devotees, can see the qualities in the others and try to awaken those qualities in ourselves, that is what association of devotees means. It doesn't mean just hanging out, right? Very important to understand that. Hearing and chanting the holy name, that again we covered early on. If there's offenses, or as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur pointed out, if you're hearing and chanting but you're not actually inquiring into the Supreme, then what is this hearing and chanting? It's not having so much effect on you. If you're not falling in love to the point where you want to know more about Krishna, that you actually go out of your way to find out more about Krishna, instead you just robotically go shnika shnika nam 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 shnika shnika nam, then are you chanting? That's the question. Again, those syllables, even if you chant it offensively, there's some benefit. But again, we're not looking for some benefit. We're looking for the benefit, right? So we want to do these things properly. We don't want to just say, okay, no, I robotically went through my prescribed number of rounds, or maybe I modified my prescribed number of rounds to be more practical, and I got it down to, one good round per day, right? But then I robotically did that one too. So then I was like, all right, one good mantra per day, and then, I'll really, really focus on it. We do these things. It's not going to work. So if we understand what these things mean and why they work, then, then we have a chance. Otherwise, if we just look at the external factor of it, and then residing in the holy places. So again, so these 5 things, but these 5 things should be done properly. They should be understood properly and then done properly, as best as we can. It means we're not going to do them perfectly right off the bat, and we shouldn't become discouraged when we're falling short. We should be encouraged that we notice that we're falling short, because now I know to take it more seriously and to try harder, right? And so sometimes that means adjusting who we spend time with, right? So that we can get more benefit out of sadhu sangha, right? We surround ourselves with like-minded devotees so that we're encouraged and enthusiastic to hear and chant properly. So all these things are together, right? The association of devotees, the properly understanding Srimad Bhagavatam, the proper application of hearing and chanting, the mood that we'll have when we're seeing the deity, and where we want to be situated, right? Those are all linked if we do them properly. Otherwise, they're just items on a checklist. So we want to make sure that we're not falling into that trap. Because once again, I'll read this line: devotional performances devoid of devotional sentiments are not conducive to devotion. So just the external part, devoid of the proper sentiments, not conducive to devotion. Yes.
Line of comment.
Oh, good.
Should I read?
Vikramini, Hare Krishna. Greetings to Bulgaria. Vikramini says, we should study the Srimad Bhagavatam in the company of like-minded devotees who are favorable to us and who are more advanced than us. Yes, absolutely. Did she say that right before I said? Yeah. We're thinking the same, Mataji. Thank you for that. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Or if so, I guess type again. Could she unmute? Is that a thing? Oh. Anyway, so if it was just a comment, thank you for that. It's very good observation. Yes. And that's how they're all linked together too. The association of devotees and the study of the Bhagavatam. Like-minded and more advanced. Exactly. Very good. So then continuing. In the next verse, the author, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, describes the previously mentioned renunciation aspect of upaya bhakti. This is Sutra 36, right? Because we talked about renunciation and how it's not a part of bhakti, but it's necessary. It's necessary in order to properly have bhakti. What was it? A necessary associate, or how was it worded? Necessary associates, yeah, Jnana and Vairagya, but not parts of bhakti. But then the next sutra said upaya bhakti has its parts, right? The intent devotion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and renunciation of the material world. So for upaya bhakti or sadhana bhakti, you would actually consider it a part of that, but it's not part of bhakti. That's the sadhana part of the sadhana bhakti, right? So it's not the phala bhakti. Once you have the fruit of bhakti, then there's no longer a need for separate cultivation of knowledge or separate renunciation, because that's just the natural form of the spirit soul. Okay, so Sutra 36. Deha ratam mana saratim indriya hayam astikya yanena yukta vairagyena chavishaya margach Chanair nivartayed esha eva pratyaharaha. The physical body is the chariot, the mind is the charioteer, and the senses are the horses. Driving this chariot back to the divinity away from the part of worldly attachments by the help of divine knowledge and balanced abnegation, which is renunciation, is known as retraction. So here we're talking about retraction. And note, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he doesn't say knowledge and renunciation. He says divine knowledge, right? Because it's important, because these two things, anyway, so there's knowledge, and when we learned that knowledge is the, Tulsi Prabhu, you remember the word? The natural. Love is inclination. It's what?
Natural characteristic.
Characteristic, yeah. So characteristic and inclination. So characteristic is knowledge, inclination is love. So knowledge is there. So knowledge aimed or utilized properly is divine knowledge. So this is why it says divine knowledge, and then balanced abnegation, because renunciation can also go either way. You need to be renounced from the material world to be attached to the spiritual world, but you can become renounced from the material world without becoming attached to the spiritual world, right? So renunciation is not enough. That's why it's important that it says balanced abnegation. Yes, Tulsi.
Do you have to be like detached from the material in order to become attached to the spiritual? Or if you become attached to the spiritual, then automatically you become detached from the material? How does it work?
It's both. But right now, we have such an attachment to the material that it happens simultaneously, right? So right now, we are clutching onto a handful of sand, holding on to dear life, both. And then Krishna is handing us divine love, way better than sand. But we still have a tight grip on that sand because we still think it has value. Until we actually are convinced that it has no value whatsoever compared to what's being offered to us, and actually let it go. It's not just that I am convinced that's what I want, and then try to, no, you gotta let go of it, right? That's how it works. Because the only reason we're in material consciousness is because we think we're independent from Krishna, we're separate from him, and that something outside of Krishna has value. So all we're holding on to is a grand illusion. It's not even real. But as long as our attachment for it is real, then we cannot become spiritually attached. So you can say it either way, but when you say it the first way, that one has to become materially detached in order to become attached to spirit, then it puts it in more of a usable context for us. It is true that if you become spiritually attached, you will also become naturally materially detached. But generally for us, it doesn't happen in that direction, because what is it that we're spontaneously attracted to right now? It's matter, right? So that's what we have to work on. Whatever attachment we do have for Krishna, we fan that spark, and then that grows, and then naturally we become detached. So that's also there. But we have to be very careful with it. It's true, the way you said it, absolutely true. But we can misunderstand it and become stagnant and lazy. If we think about it that way, that's gonna, it's gonna.
You're attached to both at the same time.
Yeah.
You like Krishna consciousness, but you also want to.
Yeah, there's so many analogies. You have, your 2 feet are in 2 different boats, that you're on the spiritual. The one that I like to use is, we're here in this material world. It's like being on the platform of the train station. Sometimes there's express trains. They don't stop at the station. They go, because you're at a local station, and this is an express train. So if you hold on to a pole on the train platform, and then as that express train's going by, you try to grab onto the train, that's essentially what we're doing by being attached to both. We're ripping ourselves apart.
Nice analogy.
You might think, all right, well, if I grab on hard enough, at least half of me's going. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. Very
So does that mean that at some point in our spiritual life we will feel the we will leave the oasis of material sense gratification, but still we won't be in the spiritual world with the spiritual taste. So we will have to go through like something like a desert between the material life, material habits, and the ultimate spiritual taste.
I'm not sure I know what you're saying there. Say it again.
Like, it looks like there will be a period where we will leave material taste and material objects of sense gratification, but still we won't really have the enjoyment of the spiritual objects and spiritual sense gratification. So
that doesn't sound fun. That doesn't sound fun at all. Generally, it's not like that. If it feels like that, it means that we're really attached to material. We're not detached from it. We might be averse to it. We're not detached though. Generally, because they happen together, it's like a balance, right? The scale, material attachment and spiritual attachment, sense gratification, self-realization. And so, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, it starts helping us see things clearly. So then we realize that there's nothing there in matter. So we become detached from it. It's just good common sense once you see it, right? That's happening as a result of whatever amount of spiritual attachment we have, right? So that works the way that you were saying before. Generally, it happens like that. It's sometimes also we're tested to see if we're actually detached. Because otherwise, if you're saying you're basically in this desert before you're experiencing the spiritual bliss, desert sounds pretty bleak, right? It sounds like you're depriving. That's deserted. Desert means it's deserted from all of the things you need, like water, whatever. You know, there's no other life there. It's just there. So it's not like that.
We have comment again.
Another comment. Okay, another Vikramini again. Thank you. It is very easy to be detached from the material, but much more difficult to be attached to Krishna. Oh, she has a problem with her microphone. That's why she's typing. And then she says, this detachment becomes very strong, especially as one starts to grow old. Yeah, that's a good observation.
Especially when?
When one starts to grow old, because then it becomes more obvious that this situation's not sustainable. It's similar to the smasana vairagya, the renouncement that you feel after attending a funeral. But when you're yourself growing old, it lasts longer, because usually smasana vairagya lasts like a day or two, a week if you were really close to the person. But when you're becoming old, you're constantly reminded that this is all coming to an end. And if you know your spirit soul, you know, you feel that this isn't right. The fact that all of this is ending, it's not right. Things aren't happening the way they used to. So yeah, it's true, especially for those who are practicing self-realization. Detachment comes easier in that stage. But we see the materialists who aren't trying to pursue self-realization, they're just as attached when they're old as they are when they're young. Plenty of examples of very, very old men just enjoying to the very topmost of their capacity to the very end. You know, the most common example that's given is Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner is the founder of Playboy magazine, so he had a mansion, and he's left his body now. But till his dying day, he had a mansion filled with young, beautiful ladies who he put in his magazine, so they, I guess, felt the need to reciprocate his generosity. Like, you know, the love, when it's for the benefactor, is called gratitude, right? So he was their benefactor, and so it's their shadow of love to reciprocate with him and with gratitude. He's just one example. There's so many, you know, well-to-do people who did like that. They just kept trying to enjoy till the end. I think Walt Disney, I think, actually had his head frozen because he figured once scientists figure out how to extend life, they'll just defrost him and then he'll be able to continue his, you know, his life. A bunch of other people have done that too, but yeah. So for the devotees, that's especially true. And it seems like it should be true for everyone because, you know, everybody knows they're going to die, so they should become detached. But it does become easier if you are on the path of self-realization to become detached when we're becoming older. That's true. But yeah, I don't know if did I answer your thing about the desert? Do people feel that way? Is that what the thing is? Or
I think sometimes.
Because it seems to me that if one does feel that way, then it means that you weren't actually becoming detached from the material world, you were becoming maybe averse to it. And so, because the only reason you would feel that you're in a desert is that that you should be getting something that you're not getting, right? And so maybe you still think you should be getting it from material, but you physically step back from it. And so you're kind of in a state of regret. But a lot of times that's just Krishna seeing if we're sincere or not. Did you really give it up? Because if you actually gave it up, then you will already have attachment for Krishna. But if you're not, if you're just in a state where you've physically given the thing up, but you're still meditating on why I'm not actually getting any more enjoyment. Like I used to get enjoyment out of this thing. I can still do it, but I'm not because I'm in this, you know, state. That's my analysis of it. Because generally, you know, once you have that, you get the higher taste. That's why you let it go. They go together, right? That's why when you said it both ways, both are true. But it's more helpful to us to focus on hearing it from the one way, because then we'll be more encouraged to actually go through the process. Because it's all about us. It's not. So there's the two things that are needed, and we meditate on those this month, Kartik. The two fingers too short of the ropes. What are they?
Endeavor
and
mercy.
Mercy and endeavor. Okay. So the one side, which is you have to become detached from material to become attached to spiritual, that's talking about endeavor. And you have to, when you become attached to spiritual, you become detached from matter. That's talking about the mercy, right? We don't have to worry about the mercy because Krishna's mercy is causeless. It's out there for everyone, whoever takes advantage of it. So as far as we're concerned, we focus on the endeavor, but we don't focus on it too much that we think we're the doer, right? So we have to do the endeavor, but we have to be detached. We have to know that although I'm doing this action, trying to get that mercy, it's actually the mercy that's taking me back. It's not my endeavor. But if I don't endeavor, I can't take advantage of the mercy. It's a very fine point that we all have to understand, because usually we want to do one or the other. If it's all about the mercy, then I'm gonna lay back and let it happen, right? That's the kitten part of the analogy. The kitten, it is completely aloof to the fact that there's danger around. And the mom's like, oh, gotta get the kitten out, grabs it from the neck and takes it out. The monkey, it's all about the endeavor for the baby monkey, because if that baby doesn't get on his mom real quick before the danger's there, mom will be gone. And he has to hold on for dear life, right? So that's all about the endeavor. We're both, but we can't do anything about the mercy. It's always coming. We just have to endeavor to grab it and to keep holding on to it and knowing that it's actually the mercy that's taking us away. Very fine point. And again, we tend to either go one way or the other with it. We either want to lay back and do nothing, or we want to put in the work but get credit. Because I did that. Just see all these qualities that I've accumulated for practicing devotional service for such a long time. That's not how it works. No, it's you practice devotional service, and sure, these qualities will come up, but it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your action. Krishna gave it to you. All of these things come from Krishna. It's the mentality is why we're here. If we think we're special, and we've gotten it on our own, we think we're independently accumulating these qualities, then we are in material consciousness, right? I am independent from Krishna, and I am able to develop these qualities, right? No, we're following the process. These qualities are happening, but it's all Krishna's mercy. I'm just an instrument. And, you know, we shouldn't become proud of them anyway, because basically we're just uncovering our original state, and it's still not uncovered yet. You know, that's like, you know, you walk into a room and it's filthy, right? And then you start sweeping the floor and you take a bucket of dirt out of it, but it's still filthy. It's, you know, it's still filthy. So you don't say, oh, man, look at all this dirt I removed. No. The room's supposed to be clean completely. So you don't brag about the dirt that you got rid of. You finish cleaning it, and then it's at its proper state. You don't brag about that either. Like, okay, good, you finally brought it back to where it was supposed to be. There's no, you know, you shouldn't be bragging. So, yeah, that makes sense.
That means we have to put the endeavors in order to be able to get the mercy.
Yes, and be detached from that endeavor. So it's funny because I said you have to focus on the endeavor, not the mercy, but it's the mercy that's taking you there. It means we focus on the mercy too, but we don't have to worry about that. We have nothing to do with the mercy. It's always going to be there. So we just have, so in other words, there's a rope hanging down. That's Krishna's mercy, right? So we grab onto it, he's going to pull us up. That's what we do. That's the extent of what we can do, is grab onto the rope. Now, as he's pulling us up, if we say, yeah, see that? It was all me, see? And then we let go of the rope, and then boom. And conversely, if we stand there and say, yeah, but it's all about Krishna's mercy, right? There it is, the rope. But if we don't grab onto it, how's he going to pull us up? Right? I mean, he could, he's Krishna, but again, the whole free will thing. Love only works. It's only dynamic if there's the option not to. So us not grabbing the rope is us saying, no, Krishna, not right now. I still want to be independent from you. Right? So that's how it's like. Another way to see it is, you know, there's all these different radio signals right now flying through the air. We can't perceive them unless we have a receiver, right? And then we turn to a certain frequency, and then we can hear different songs or people talking or, you know, whatever. So the signals are there. It's like Krishna's mercy, but we have to become receptive to it, right? So we have to become proper receivers of that. And then we have to know that when we become a proper receiver, we're not the doer of that. Krishna's the doer of that. We're just finally actually, you know, listening to him. It's a super fine point. It can take many births to understand fully. Because the tendency is, when we see the wrong side, we want to counteract it by preaching the other side. And then we become that. It's called overcorrecting. So when a plane's going to land, if its right wing is down a little bit, so the pilot has to correct it. And so you pull the stick, and then when you're almost level, you let go of the stick because it'll continue, right? But if you wait until you're level and then you stop, then you go like this. It's called overcorrecting. So first you were like this, and then you end up like this. They're both bad positions because you can't land like that. you'll crash. So this is the same thing. Is first we'll rely mostly on mercy, and no, it's all about Krishna, 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 Krishna. Yeah, okay. That's one aspect. Then we say, oh, no, wait, it's going to need some endeavor. Then we put too much emphasis on endeavor, and then we're attached. We think we're the doer, right? And we say, oh, no, that doesn't work. Let's go back to mercy, right? We don't want the healthy balance. Why would we do that? But that's what we need to do. We need to understand how both are working together. So that's how it's working. Krishna's mercy is there. We grab on, but we have to be detached. We can't think that we're the doer of that. But I'm the one that grabbed the rope. We're supposed to be on the rope.
So in this example, can we say to get detached from matter is our job, and to get spiritual taste is Krishna's job?
Yeah, you can say that, because there's the real ego and there's the false ego, right? So as long as we're identifying with I'm independent from Krishna, then we're on this side, we're material. As long as we're identifying with I am servant of Krishna, we're good. So you can kind of say it like that. It makes some sense. But either way, it's, Krishna is in charge of both of them. But we have the capacity to utilize our free will in the proper way, which purifies the consciousness, which is currently polluted. And then once it's purified, then we're back in our original state. And so by the help of divine knowledge, not just knowledge, and balanced abnegation or renunciation, balanced meaning you have to understand that while becoming detached from the material world, you also have to become attached to the spiritual world. That's known as retraction. So retraction means we are currently in the material situation because of our misuse of free will. So we want to retract from that. The physical body, which is the chariot, the mind, the charioteer, the senses are the horses. We're meant to redirect it all and go back toward divinity, right? With the help of divine knowledge and balanced renunciation. And that's retraction. So essentially, we're doing the opposite of what got us here. What got us here was the desire to enjoy separately from Krishna. So we do the opposite of that. We try to enjoy with Krishna as the center. And that's called retraction. That's Sutra 36. Good? Okay. This switch from material to spiritual consciousness, this retraction, is accomplished by active devotional service, right? Not passive devotional service, active devotional service. In his purport to Śrī Īśopaniṣad Mantra 4, Srila Prabhupada writes, every part and parcel of the complete whole is endowed with some particular energy to act according to the Lord's will. That's our nature. When the part and parcel living force forgets his particular activities under the Lord's will, he is considered to be in Maya, illusion. Thus, from the very beginning, Śrī Īśopaniṣad warns us to be very careful to play the part designated for us by the Lord, right? Not our own part that we want to play. We want to find out what is designated to us by the Lord. This does not mean that the individual soul has no initiative of his own. Because he is part and parcel of the Lord, he must partake of the initiative of the Lord as well. When a person properly utilizes his initiative or active nature with intelligence, understanding, and everything, that everything is the Lord's potency, he can revive his original consciousness, which was lost due to association with Maya, the external energy. So again, we switch that. Instead of associating with the external energy, we associate back with the internal energy. Then we revive our original consciousness. So that which is currently holding us down will no longer be holding us down because we're not seeing ourselves as the enjoyer anymore. Right? That's the only influence it has on us. Because we jivas are of a superior nature. Right? But we've chosen to hide from Krishna in the shadow, and then we're complaining about, why can't I enjoy the benefits of the sun? Well, because you're standing in the shade. you can enjoy the benefits of the sun by walking into the sun. So that's essentially what's being said here. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments on Sutra 36. The body is here called the chariot because it is controlled by the mind. The mind is called the charioteer because it controls the senses. Senses are called the horses because they pull the chariot of the body here and there. The transcendental soul has entered into materialistic hunting of this material world and is enjoying the results of his actions. The returning back of this jiva to his own abode is known as retraction. There are three kinds of retractions pertaining to the retraction of the senses, which is also known as renunciation, asceticism, restraint, and sense control. The retractions of the body, which comes in the form of penance, sacrifice, purity, and different types of yoga. And the retraction of the mind, forgiveness, sincerity, non-stealing, truthfulness, and learning. So retracting the senses, retracting the body, and retracting the mind. By adopting these methods, the body, the mind, and the senses become properly controlled, and one attains self-realization and the soul's natural function. Krishna Bhakti flourishes. So the soul's natural function is Krishna Bhakti, and it flourishes when we retract the body, the mind, and the senses from the materialistic hunting in this material world. Right? So, proper use of the free will in the right direction takes away all those things that are holding us back, and then our natural function, which is Krishna Bhakti, then can flourish. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verses 20 and 21, the Supreme Personality of Godhead also says, "This stage of perfection is called trance or samadhi, when one's mind is completely restrained from the material mental activities by practice of yoga. This is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness and enjoys himself through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth." In Bhagavad Gita 6:28, the Supreme Personality of Godhead also says, "Steady in the self, being free from all material contamination, the yogi achieves the highest perfectional stage of happiness in touch with the Supreme Consciousness." All right, so becoming free from material contamination, that's when you can reach the highest stage. But again, it has to be balanced, because you can free yourself from material contamination without getting that positive attraction to spirituality, and you end up in a very messy situation. Bhakti is the ultimate fruit of all these yoga sadhanas. Bhagavad Gita 6:47, the Supreme Personality of Godhead says, "And of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all." Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues, "Retraction is a part of the upaya bhakti because it helps the blooming of bhakti." Right? So we want the phala bhakti, the ripened fruit of bhakti, pure bhakti. But sadhana bhakti, upaya bhakti, there has to be this aspect of retraction, because it means we're here in the material world, so we have to retract, right? Many people are in deep illusion and think that Sankhya, yoga, karma, tapasya, and so forth bring in separate fruits. They will be enlightened by the concluding verse of the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita noted below. So those who think that there's separate fruits from Sankhya, yoga, karma, tapasya, etc., Krishna says, "A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing austere sacrifices, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities, at the end he reaches the supreme abode. So all of these are just side effects of practicing bhakti, all the results that can come from these different paths. And the only reason these different paths have any effect whatsoever is because they have some sort of mixture of bhakti in it, and that's why they're able to bear fruit. So the best is just to engage in bhakti straightforward, without the other elements. The monistic process is also part of retraction, by the help of which the retraction of the mind may be achieved. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 12th canto, 5th chapter, verses 11 and 12, Srila Shukadeva Goswami gives his final instruction to Maharaj Parikshit. You should consider, quote, I am non-different from the absolute truth, the supreme abode, and that absolute truth, the supreme destination, is non-different from me, end quote. Thus, resigning yourself to the Supreme Soul, who is free from all material misidentifications, you will not even notice the snake bird Takshaka when he approaches with his poison-filled fangs and bites your foot, nor will you see your dying body or the material world around you, because you will have realized yourself to be separate from them. So that means he's already become detached from the material world. He doesn't even notice it. He doesn't feel it. He doesn't think about it. He's not stressed about it. He's not thinking, man, that's going to hurt. Snakebird's going to bite me in the foot. That's going to be terrible. It's excruciating. No, he doesn't even notice it because he's attached to Krishna. Right? He understands that his nature is the same as Krishna's nature, spiritual. So none of these material things, just like Krishna cannot be affected by any of these material things, a spirit soul who's properly identifying, in other words, the real ego, properly utilizing his free will, also cannot be affected by anything material. So when Takshaka comes, you won't even notice. You won't even see your dying body. You won't see the material world. You will have realized yourself completely. Similarly, in Bhagavad Gita 1854, the Supreme Personality of Godhead explains the results of the monastic process. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity, and in that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Natsochati nakamshati. He has there's nothing that he doesn't have that he wants, and if something is taken from him, he doesn't lament, because he understands the supreme position. Nothing material can satisfy him, only spirit, and you can't take away spirit. There are many types of retractions described by the sages. It is not necessary to follow all of them. If the essential retractions are followed, they will help the aspirant. In Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter, verses 10 and 11, the Supreme Personality of Godhead tells Arjuna, if you cannot practice the regulations of bhakti-yoga, then just try to work for me, because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. If, however, you are unable to work in this consciousness, then try to act giving up all the results of your work and try to be self-situated. The conclusion is that the retraction of the body, mind, and the senses should be thoroughly achieved by any of the genuine methods of retraction. So you deal with what your attraction is. Whatever your level of attraction is to the material world, that's the level of retraction you have to employ, right? So if you're interested in fruitive results, then you have to start in karma yoga, right? That's the process of retraction. But if you're done with accumulating material things and then you're doing Naishkarma Karma Yoga, right? You're still doing some activities, but it's all for Krishna, right? But otherwise, you could just be situated in pure bhakti. Either way, the retraction has to happen. So we have to identify where our attractions lie, and then follow the appropriate aspect of retraction. But you have to keep in mind that you have to keep bhakti in the center of it. Otherwise, you're just independently trying to become detached from something without becoming positively attracted to spiritual life. Even though retraction is a part of the upaya bhakti, sadhana bhakti, it may be dangerous for the ignorant men who think that retraction is an independent process with separate results. Such people cause the shutting down of the door to their own progress. Right? So as I mentioned, it's dangerous to think that this process of retraction, if we see it as independent from bhakti, we see that it has its own value, and we think, materially speaking, I'm better off now that I've become detached from these base, desires, and now I can enjoy better, right? That actually shuts the door on all of our progress. So that's why we have to always have the focus where it belongs. Because of the superficial differences between the different processes of retraction, there are sectarian controversies which are quite unnecessary. Means, like we talked about this morning, there were 3 verses given that were talking about when you properly utilize your nature in Krishna service. One was talking about karma, so whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, give away. Then there was one about intelligence, engaging your intelligence in Krishna, and then the other one was the yoga. But they were all about doing whatever you're doing for Krishna, right? So this is saying that since there are superficial differences between these processes, many different sectarian controversies arise, and they're quite unnecessary. It means, I think, no, we're talking about the path of yoga. No, we're talking about the path of jnana. No, we're talking about the path of karma yoga, right? But they're all the same because they're all putting Krishna in the center. So whatever your current attachment is, whether it's through activities, culture of knowledge, or renunciation, meditation, whatever your attachment is, that's how you have to. That's your method of retraction. It's the same thing, but we see it as different only because we're identifying with that which is separate from the bhakti. If we solve the bhakti, then we would see, it's all the same process. Because one is using your actions for Krishna, one is cultivating your intelligence for Krishna, and one is centering your meditation on Krishna. But it's all about Krishna. To avoid such controversies, the retraction should be properly followed in association with theistic knowledge and appropriate renunciation. Again, it doesn't just say knowledge and renunciation here. It says theistic knowledge, means knowledge toward Krishna, toward God, not material knowledge, and appropriate renunciation, means not independent of bhakti. So they both have to be directed toward Krishna. So this wording is always very carefully worded, right? So we have to take note of that. Here, one may protest. The dindim drum of the Vedic conclusion proclaims knowledge brings liberation. As for you, why do you emphasize the words spiritual knowledge? Why must this knowledge be spiritual in character? To refute this objection, the author, Srila Bhakti-yoga Thakur, speaks the following words. Before we do Sutra 37, is there anything on 36? It was a long commentary. We covered a lot. Was there anything left unclear about that? Divine knowledge and balanced renunciation.
Could you conclude 36 sutra?
Conclude 36? Yeah. So, Sutra 36 is saying that there are a lot of reasons that we are here in this material world, a lot of aspects why, but it all comes down to our misuse of free will. But it comes in form of the body, the mind, and the senses. And so, depending on what is most strongly attaching us to the material world, body, mind, or senses, whatever mixture they have, to that extent we have to engage them properly and retract from the material world. And that has to be done with divine knowledge. So not just knowledge, but knowledge toward Krishna, understanding who Krishna is, what our relationship is, and balanced renunciation, not just getting detached from the material world, but becoming attached to the spiritual world. That's what Sutra 36 is saying. So the most important thing is the retraction, but it has to be done through proper knowledge and proper renunciation. And we have to understand what those are. Otherwise, we may think we're retracting, but actually we're just engaging material knowledge and material renunciation to come up with a better material situation, which is not retraction at all.
Could you give some example, practical example in our life?
Practical example in our life.
But we should listen to it more deep properly.
Okay. I can give the same example I gave last year, and it's really on the nose because I used to drive a chariot. Part of my attachment to the material world, this is just one aspect, was I used to be a race car driver. You remember the story. Then, through the help of Bhishma Dev's instructions, I learned a lot about detachment. I haven't perfected detachment by any means necessary, but I understood that detachment has to be balanced, right? It's not just falgu vairagya or occasional or, the monkey vairagya, that one. You know what that one means? The renunciation of the monkey. People say it, but do you know what it means?
I don't know what this pronunciation means.
The renunciation of the monkey. So the monkey, right? So sometimes you find these sages and they go off into the woods, they become ascetics, they don't, they're naked, they don't wear anything, and they call that their spiritual practice. They renounce society and move to the forest, right? And it's called the renunciation of the monkey because the monkeys also are doing that, but they're engaging in all sorts of sexual affairs and things like that, much like some of these, in other words, if they weren't properly renounced, that's what they're going to do in the woods anyway. So what's the difference between them and the monkeys? They've left society, they've let behind their clothes, but they're still engaging in sense gratification in that field. So there's these different types of vairagyas that are not complete. So I thought I was renounced in that I was driving the chariot, right, the race car, but I was using the fruits. Every time I won money, I was engaging in Krishna service. I was also using it as a preaching opportunity. I had a couple of world records, and when people asked me how I'm consistently so good, I said, I'm doing it for Krishna. So there's these aspects, and I also used it to help focus my japa. I know that's a strange one, but it worked. And for me, that was renunciation because I wasn't doing it for me, I was doing it for Krishna. But is that really what Krishna wanted me to do? Right? And so through Bhishma Dev's instructions, he led me to understand that, yes, that's good. It was preaching, it had its place. But now it's time to do something else that's more directly Krishna service. So that's balanced abnegation, right? So the attachment I had was racing cars, even though I was dovetailing it still wasn't perfect yet. So take that a step back, and now I'm doing the next service, which also I still have some attachments to. But then if I properly follow this with divine knowledge and balanced renunciation, then gradually, you're retracting from the material world. So your attachments are shedding off, and your attachment to Krishna is growing. Does that make sense? Was that a good enough example? Like I was literally driving a chariot. But yeah, so the attachment was there. And so once we understand actual knowledge and actual renunciation, then we can step away from it without regret. And it's actually a progressive step. It's not that it wasn't fallible by Ravi where I gave it up, that I was continuously meditating on it. Man, I had world records. I was good and I was preaching it. No, it's just done. Done. Now the next thing. All right. So that's an example. There are many examples. But whatever our attachments are, we have to see them through proper knowledge and proper renunciation. And then gradually we're retracting means we're dissolving those attachments and cultivating new attachments to Krishna. Good? Okay. So, Sutra 37. Jnanan mukti jnanad bandhas cha. Divine knowledge brings liberation, and mundane knowledge brings bondage, right? So we talked about the difference between proper renunciation and improper renunciation. And now we're going to, again, talk about proper knowledge and improper knowledge, right? We talked about it a little bit before when we were talking about knowledge and love being characteristics of the soul. But we're going to talk about it again in the context of using that knowledge to actually either become more bound to the material world or to help us become liberated from the material world. So, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments, the first kind of knowledge here is spiritual knowledge, or knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word muktihi here means liberation from material bondage. The second kind of knowledge here is material knowledge, or also the dry theories of impersonalists. The word bandha here means bondage in the cycle of repeated births and deaths. We find the same concept in Śrī Īśopaniṣad Mantra 10, where it is stated, the wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience. Śrī Īśopaniṣad further discriminates between the two levels of bondage, the ordinary ignorance and the false knowledge. This distinction is shown in Mantra 9. Those who engage in the culture of nescient activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. In the following words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in the following words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead affirms that material knowledge binds one to the material world. He says in Bhagavad Gita 14th chapter, verse 6, those situated in the mode of goodness develop knowledge, but they become conditioned by the concept of happiness. The conclusion of the atheists and blasphemers is given in these words of the Vidvan Moda Tarangini. What is action? Who is the seer of things? When and by whom are karmic reactions obtained? How does one attain another birth in this world? If someone asks these questions, then I reply, these questions have no answers. There is no way anyone can find answers to these questions. The truth is that life is like a flowing river that brings sometimes pleasures and sometimes pains. The material body is temporary. It will die. The truth is that the entire world is unreal. It does not exist. It is all an illusion. This type of pseudo-knowledge results in more bondage of the jivas. It is known as empiric knowledge. Empiric means it's based on observation from the senses. Even the animals belong to this category because they too are not aware of the results of their activities about their past and future. This type of atheistic people spend their time following the urges of the senses and at the end of life attain downfall. On the other hand, those who do not believe in the existence of the individual soul and want to become merged with Brahman are dry Gnostics. But real liberation is attained only by those souls who became liberated by experiencing the bliss of love of God. Those who have attained nirvana cannot be called liberated because their state is only advanced in the sattva guna, and they will not be able to taste the bliss of love toward the absolute, which is beyond the triple qualities of phenomena, goodness, passion, and ignorance. In the Śrī Chaitanya Chandrodaya Nataka 777, Srila Ramananda Roy explains, they who cannot taste sweetness will drink the bitter nimba juice of impersonal liberation. We, however, who know what is sweet, drink the dark sweet nectar the amorous gopis drank through the corners of their eyes. In response to Lord Chaitanya's questions, Sri Ramananda Rai explained in Chaitanya Chandrodaya Nataka 761, they who love Krishna's lotus feet and do not love anything else, who delight in bhakti-yoga, the yoga of devotional service, and are not attracted to Ashtanga yoga or any other kind of yoga, and who place their love in the transcendental form of Lord Krishna and not in their own external material body, are actually liberated and free from the material world. Non-devotees who claim to be liberated are not so. So this second to the last, well, it's really the end of the first sentence. The most important part, those who place their love in the transcendental form of Lord Krishna and not in their own external material body are actually liberated and free from the material world. So you have to be actually placing your love in Krishna, not in yourself, right? In the next sutra, the author explains the meaning of the word yukta, appropriate, in the phrase yukta vairagya, appropriate renunciation. Anything on that sutra about knowledge? So just like we were talking about how to properly use knowledge, renunciation in the previous sutra, here we're talking about how to use knowledge. We're using it focused around ourselves, it's going to bring bondage. If it's centered around Krishna, it'll bring liberation. It's funny because our philosophy, it's always the same thing. If it's centered around Krishna, it's going to give a good result. If it's centered around ourselves, it's going to give a bad result. Whether it's renunciation, knowledge, happiness, anything. Because that's what our philosophy is. Krishna consciousness. That means Krishna has to be the center. Right? That's our society. If we're actually cultivating self-consciousness and we're saying we're Krishna conscious, that doesn't mean anything because we're here in the material world. It's not going to give a result. We actually have to become Krishna conscious. Krishna has to be the center. We have to place our love in the transcendental form of Krishna and not in our own external material body. Then and only then are we actually liberated and free from the material world. Non-devotees who claim to be liberated are not so. Right? So in other words, we're claiming, if we fit into the category of non-devotee, which means we place our love in our external body, not Krishna, that means non-devotee. So we may claim to be devotees, but we're not until this phenomena takes place. Our love is only those who love Krishna's lotus feet and do not love anything else, nothing else, right? They're liberated. No one else is liberated. Okay, Sutra 38. This is super important. I've heard so many different versions of a misinterpretation of the term yukta vairagya. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur will define very clearly what it is for us. Sutra 38. Vairagyam mukti vairagyat bandhascha. Right? That sounded similar to 37, right? Jnanam mukti jnanat bandhascha. Vairagyam mukti vairagyat bandhascha. It's the same exact sutra, except you took jnanan and changed it to vairagyam. Proper renunciation brings liberation, whereas dry renunciation brings additional bondage. Right? There's a theme here. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments. In this sutra, the author explains the meaning of the word yukta, appropriate, and the phrase yukta vairagya, appropriate renunciation. Renunciation is of two kinds. One, yukta vairagya, appropriate renunciation, and two, palgu vairagya, false renunciation. Proper renunciation is performed when, without being attached to the results of one's work and acting purely and in a saintly manner, one offers the results of his work to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This kind of renunciation brings liberation from bondage of repeated birth and death. Who's familiar with that definition of Yukta Vairagya? What other definitions of Yukta Vairagya have any of you heard? Yeah.
Usually it's like whatever we are attached to, we are employing in the Lord service.
Yes, unfortunately. Whatever we're attached to, we employ in the Lord's service. But here it's without being attached to the results of one's work and acting purely in a saintly manner. So, yeah, we tend to think Yukta Vairagya means, you can use technology in Krishna service, which you can. You can use anything in Krishna service, right? But it has to be done in a mood of detachment and in a purely saintly manner. So recently means like, I guess this was several months ago. We were talking about Yukta Vairagya in a Bhagavatam class. And it's a common conception that Yukta Vairagya just means utilizing whatever you have in Krishna service. And that's an aspect of Yukta Vairagya for sure. But in order to make it clear, I said a very common example of Yukta Vairagya was that Srila Prabhupada used a dictaphone, right? So he would speak his purports into a dictaphone, and then his disciples would listen to it, and then they would type them up. And that's how our books appeared. Srila Prabhupada spoke them, and the disciples typed them out. Sometimes they made errors because Srila Prabhupada's accent wasn't quite familiar, so we get things like the planet of the trees instead of the pit trees and things like that, but that's how it was done. So it's a good example of Yukta Vairagya because Srila Prabhupada, he wasn't attached to the results of the work and he was acting in a purely saintly manner. So he was able to use this technology without being attached. So the point that I had to make clear to the devotees was that if Srila Prabhupada didn't have the dictaphone, he still would have published the books. He would have found a way because that's what he was doing, right? He wasn't dependent on the technology. He was using it because it was convenient and he had no attachment to it whatsoever and he was acting in a purely saintly manner. Now, we try to say that we use these Yukta Vairagya, and we do to an extent, right? To some extent, we are engaging these devices that we have in our pockets in Krishna service. And there's an aspect of Yukta Vairagya there. But if we consider it purely Yukta Vairagya, then we are kidding ourselves.
At least Yukta.
Means what? There's no Vairagya involved? Is that what you're saying?
Well, at least we are connecting it with Krishna, but maybe we are not attached to him.
Yeah, but Yukta means appropriate. We think Yukta means utilize. Yukta means appropriate. So it depends. Some people can use it properly and appropriately. Others have a hard time. There's a lot of distractions that that are there. One example I've given in the past, I don't even know if I'm supposed to give this example anymore, but I do. Because we have so many saintly personalities that we know that have somehow gone another direction, and I don't know if we're allowed to use the examples of these sadhus anymore, but I will, because it's a good example. Mahanidhi Swami, I don't know what he goes by now, but he had this policy. He had a laptop computer for when he would write correspondence, but he locked it in a box. So he would only get it out of that box if he had to do the service. Other than that, it was locked in the box, right? So it was a good method that we can sort of employ. Maybe it won't be to the same extreme. But we should only use these things when it's actually Krishna's service, right? They shouldn't be used whimsically or for our entertainment or, you know, things like that. If they are okay, if we're working on doing better, then that's good, but we don't call it yukta vairagya because there's not much vairagya involved, and it's also not so yukta, not so appropriate. So we have to understand what this means, because otherwise we think we're doing the same thing that Srila Prabhupada did by using a dictaphone. I'm using this. It's the same thing. But are we using this exclusively for our service? Some devotees, I'm sure, are, and that's awesome. But it's very difficult to do, and therefore we have to be very, very careful, and definitely not consider it yukta vairagya. Then we'll go over more of this. Any questions before we continue on?
How we can call it if we use
Not
something,
that's appropriate.
if we use phone, how we call it?
Means-
Yukta vairagya when he used
The dictaphone, because he wasn't attached, and it was always saintly and pure,
Yeah,
pure saint. So if we're on that level, we can call it yukta vairagya.
But now,
If not, if we want to be honest, we can say that this is an occasional instrument that I can use in Krishna service, and it also binds me to this material world. If we want to be honest.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like vairagya means you renounce something, but not with the idea to use it for Krishna. And yukta vairagya means you renounce it, and you don't need it, but you use it for the purpose of Krishna because everything belongs to Him.
Sort of. There's another aspect of Falgu Vairagya. It means that it can mean that you physically give something up, but you're still mentally attached to it, so you haven't renounced it. So, thank you for bringing that up, because since I know that this is binding me to the material world and I can only occasionally use it in Krishna service, if I threw it in the Ganga, but am still attached to it, that's Falgu Vairagya. So I'm not by any means saying that the devotees should throw their phones in the garbage disposals, although it might not be the worst idea. But if we have these attachments to it, then until we actually come up with a mature, until we actually become detached from it, then we don't do that, because there are aspects about them that are quite useful in Krishna service, right? We can listen to lectures. We can connect with sadhus all over the world. There's so many Zoom classes now, and even if not live ones, we can watch the YouTube ones. It has some serious potential, and we can use it properly. But when we notice that we're not, we have to at least be honest with ourselves and try to get to that point where we're detached from it, where we're only using it. So if that means, okay, I only use it for service, or let's say, because sometimes we have to wean ourselves off of these things. Let's say we notice, because we should pay attention to these things. How much time do I spend on? You can even there's an app on there that'll help you to understand how much time you spend on each of different app, right? I think I don't have it, but I'm sure there is. There's a usage. You have it? Smart fellow, right? So we can see, okay, how much time am I was going to say wasting, but I'll just say spending. How much time are we spending on like social media, for example? And that's not all a waste because, you know, there's sadhus on social media that are showing wonderful pictures of deities. When I was back in America, I still got to take darshan of Radhamadava every day, thanks to some very nice devotee. Got to see close up, closer than I could see here live, right? Because they're like up there. You get to see the nice paintings that they do, the detailed paintings that they do on Krishna's face, and that's quite nice, right? But that's not all that's there. There's a whole lot of other stuff there too, right? And so it'll show how much time we, you know, spend looking at the weather or looking, you know, whatever we're doing, or browsing the internet, or we spending time on emails, educational. Oh yeah, because I guess some people have books in their phones that they read. Nerd, no, I'm just kidding. You should. So we can see. So when we see that, okay, I spend this much time doing that. Then you can do another thing that you can also do on the phone. You could set alarms for different aspects, right? So if you find that on average I spend 3 hours doing this thing that I shouldn't be doing because it's mostly nonsense, then we can set an alarm for 2.5 hours. So when I get to the 2.5 hour point, at least a notification will come up and be like, hey, you've already done this for 2.5 hours today, you know. And then it's up to you. Again, Krishna draws our chariot between the two armies. He shows us what our attachments are, but it's up to us whether we actually do. So maybe the notification comes on and we say, ah, whatever, today is different. All right, or maybe we say, okay, yeah, we'll put it down. Let's go back to the book app and read Bhagavatam. Yeah, whatever the case may be. If we're honestly retracting, right, in the language of Śrī tattva-sutra, from these attachments, instead of just trying to say that, no, it's not an attachment, this is yukta vairagya. No, call it what it actually is, assess it for what it is, to what extent are you actually using it in Krishna service, and to what extent is it necessary for that service, right? Like I said, I got to see pictures of Radhamadava on some social media thing from it. But I could also see pictures of Radhamadava through a different site where I wouldn't have to see the other people posting about stuff that really doesn't apply to me, right? I could go directly to a website which will give me the daily deity focus. So if that's all I wanted to see, I do that, right? No need to scroll through and see what everybody else is having for lunch and, you know, what the weather is in, you know, across the world and, you know, why it's such a tragedy, you know, for example. So a lot of times we make these excuses of why we need it. And so when we honestly look at these things and we can assess if we're on the path of retraction, it's okay that we're distracted by something, but we should make that distraction less and less through this process of retraction. So the knowledge has to be properly directed, the renunciation has to be properly directed. And the one before was again renunciation, wasn't it? Abnegation, yeah, renunciation, so same. So they have to be properly addressed. So the real point I'm trying to make here is that we shouldn't falsely renounce these things, bhakti-yoga, by, you know, throwing it to the side but still being attached to it. But we should identify to what extent it's actually distracting us from our devotional service, and gradually bring it into proper control. Yes.
What the difference between vairagya and renunciation? Before obligation and renunciation.
Abnegation?
Yeah, abnegation. Before we said, we talked about renunciation and knowledge, now vairagya. Yeah? What is different?
The difference between knowledge and
renunciation and vairagya.
They're the same.
Same.
Yeah.
But why
Sutra 36 was talking about abnegation. Yeah.
Why not the court? Explain.
He's explaining renunciation twice. He's also explained knowledge twice because he did knowledge before when he was talking about
He
knowledge.
explained now renunciation, then knowledge, then we again talk about vairagya.
Yeah.
What is different?
It's the same, but it's very important to understand. So this is another aspect of it, because just like, so that was talking about how we retract by using our mind, body, and senses and bring them away from those material attractions and bring them toward Krishna's attachment to Krishna. So that was talking about both knowledge and renunciation. It's the divine knowledge and balanced abnegation. So that one's talking about both knowledge and renunciation. Now, that was 36. 37 is specifically talking about knowledge, but it's showing how when it's used properly, the result is liberation. When it's used improperly, the result is bondage. And the exact same for vairagya, for renunciation. All right, so the first one was talking about both aspects, then one after the other. Yes.
I think it's a little bit like the first sutra is describing the principle.
Yeah.
But then the idea is to show that this principle can be used in the material sphere and in the spiritual sphere. So we have to use this principle, but we have to use it especially for making spiritual advancement. Because like, in order to become materially successful, again, you are going to follow the same principle. What else you're going to follow? Again, you have to become focused and austere. But here specifically, is trying to show that it should be for Krishna.
Yes.
The purpose of spiritual advancement.
Thank you. Okay, we went over time. Sorry about that. So tomorrow, tomorrow we'll talk more about Yukta Vairagya and Palgu Vairagya. We'll drive that principle home because it's very important to understand and it's very commonly misunderstood. I have a list of things that are commonly misunderstood that are holding a lot of us back from bhakti. I'm a very observant person. I travel around and I see these things. One of them, sadhu sangha, which we talked about earlier today. If we just think proximity is sadhu sangha, then we're not actually engaged in sadhu sangha, identifying with the eternal principle and like that. So we won't get the benefit. Another one is Yukta Vairagya. There are so many, but those are two big ones on the list. But we talked about that on those five important items. How we can see them one way, but how we should actually see them. You know, living in the Dham, hearing Bhagavatam, going to see the deity, association with devotees. And can I say that one first? Is that in Dham? Shastra, Sadhu Sangha, deity, chanting, hearing and chanting. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we'll stop here. Tomorrow we'll pick up right where we left off, which is this Īśopaniṣad principle. That's what we're about to cover tomorrow. It's my favorite thing. My favorite thing about the Śrī Īśopaniṣad, because it brings it down to the simplest understanding, right? Everything belongs to Krishna. He gave you a quota. If you're using that, you're good. If you take anything more than that, you're a thief. Done. It's the simplest way to understand all philosophy. So we'll pick up on that tomorrow. Om Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The Prabhupada ki jai, the bhakti-yoga Thakur ki jai, Tattva-sutra ki jai.